there's an adapter here. But I have my own adapter. Oh, maybe? Nope. Maybe I can check my monitor settings here.
Yeah, good few minutes. People kind of filter in.
Yeah, we got some time.
Yeah, just a,
Yeah, I don't see it. Good luck. Corey's checking, I believe. I think Corey's checking.
oh.
Somebody's supposed to train me on what to do with the AV, but they're not here yet. So,
There was a guy here.
yeah.
Hey. Not on. He's a Mac user.
You're talking about the mic for people asking questions.
No, I'm supposed to make sure that the recording is on. I need to have like earphones on.
I thought there's headphones thing going on.
We are here.
I thought that's because the camera should have microphones in. That's for getting to.
Yeah, that's good. That's really fun.
All right, anything holding us up? Are we good to start whenever?
Check with the video.
I think we're good to start whenever.
Cool.
Although you need this back in your face so you can be uncomfortable too. I got one over there.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So I'm not going to lie, I'm going to rely on him for just about everything this time around because I spent all my time preparing the last talk and none of my time preparing this one. So anyway, for anybody who was here for the last one, thank you. I appreciate somebody who actually could listen to me for 2 hours. That's an achievement. We're going to talk about SIEM. Introductions first. Oh, this isn't working. Hey, there it is. JR?
All right, how's it going? Hi there, everybody. I'm JR. Currently a SIEM architect over at US Census. I also do a lot of SOAR development, so I do a lot of automation, a lot of SIEM work. I've been using SIEMs for quite a long time. Believe it or not, Cisco had a SIEM at one point. Cisco Mars was the name of the tool. I used that.
That was your first one, right?
That was my first one, and it was horrible, but I did use it. I've actually wrote one a little bit better than what they had, but never really got it panned or anything like that. The stuff I kind of built around different kind of detection methods. Also, I tend to golf a lot. If you can tell from my apparel, I just came from a Splunk conference, and I golfed 3 days out of the 7 days I was over there, so had a good time, and I also learned a lot. So
That's out of character because like I'm the manager, non-technical one. You're the smart one, but I don't golf and you golf. That's really out of character.
Often. I will be a CISO one of these days. My CISO might be here.
Just from golfing.
I do shoot better than him, so.
There you go. So I'm Shawn. I'm the head of the Security Operations Center at Verizon Media. I used to do breach consulting once upon a time and other proactive services like threat hunting. I'm a SIEM user. I'm a program builder for SOC threat hunting, whatever. And I have a podcast called Detections, and it's relatively new and kind of cool. But I mean, listen
Shameless
if you want.
plug.
It is a shameless plug. It absolutely is. But I have, no shame. I feel no shame. So, all right. So let's kick off. JR, what is a SIEM?
Well, what a SIEM? A SIEM is one of the most productive things that can be in your environment for security. It is time consuming. It takes a lot of maintenance. But what it gives you is a place, one, to store all your security related data, all your log sources. You can put that in a SIEM. Another thing great about a SIEM, since you have everything in one place, you can do correlated searches with a SIEM. And he's putting up different types of SIEMs. Now, there's lots of SIEMs out there. There's Elk, which they're our sponsor, so we can thank them. We also have
Thank you.
FireEye, Helix, they're here as well, and Azure Sentinel, they're also here. So if you're a sponsor, I will shout you out. Obviously, I'm kind of jaded. I'm a Splunk person, but I've worked with other SIEMs. I've also helped companies with other SIEMs and best practices with SIEMs in general.
So The first thing that you have to do with any piece of security technology, not just a SIEM, but especially a SIEM, because of the relative complexity of the tool, is know your use case. There's a whole bunch of different ones. You could literally be in security for compliance. We talked about that a little bit last time, but it is a valid use case. Security operations, maybe your SOC and IR teams are using this, so they're going to need certain logs. Maybe you specifically want to use it for threat hunting. Maybe you want to use it for incident response. Maybe you want to use it for insider threat. That's going to drastically change the type of data that you pull in and how you kind of have to process, look at that data, and what you're going to build from it. So it's very important to know your use case. And then we start to get into the problems. So let's talk about scoping, JR.
Okay, so scoping the log source problem. Basically, you need to figure out what you want to alert on, what you want to detect, what you need to figure out from your environment. Typically, I look at all my security tools, your firewalls, access logs, most of that things is generally a quick checkbox that's security related. And again, that will drive from your compliance. Compliance is kind of the easy part. It's an open book test. It tells you what you will collect, how you'll collect it, how you will retain it. So you follow those guidelines in creating your solution. You changed it.
No, I didn't. There. Now you can look there. But no, I did not change it.
Okay. And also, yeah, knowing your environment. You need to know what's in your environment and what you're going to collect on. And so if you have a lot of AWS devices, you need to understand what to log on AWS and what is security relevant on those systems. You also need to know all the security groups that have things that feed in your system and who can change those passwords. If those things get changed, that should be treated as a security incident because that's hindering your security process, be able to audit and monitor those types of activities.
So it's also important in this case to know how you want to go about finding things or your detection strategy. Are you going to go out of the box? Most SIEM platforms will have out of the box. Splunk has Splunk Security Essentials. Everyone has, like, these are our base detections. Are you going to use a framework and try to map to that? Are you going to take a hybrid approach and try to pull in a whole bunch of different things and build a program like that? We can talk about kind of an example. So this is MITRE ATT&CK. I'm sure everybody's seen it by now because it's been beaten to death. But we're going to use it anyway. And it might seem overwhelming, but just a couple things or one log type can actually get you data that you can use to find a lot of different attacker techniques. And that's beneficial. But you could also go what are we seeing? Who's being attacked? So if you look at the Red Canary 2019 threat report, this was great. This straight tells you, hey, PowerShell number 1, scripting number 2. This is how people are getting attacked. And we can talk about specific ways to find each one of those. So we can talk about the event IDs for PowerShell. We can talk about how to look for odd port connections. We can talk about different email logging that's beneficial.
No, definitely. I definitely did like this Red Canary report. But one thing I noticed was missing off that report, no mention of phishing. How many of you
Spear
here
phishing attachment. It's on there. It's down a little ways because most of them also include PowerShell these days. But
yeah, like you said, spear phishing in PowerShell.
But yeah, it's there.
Fair enough.
But yes, most people get attacked by phishing. You're right.
Which I typically would tend to see that on the top.
Typically, yeah. So we've kind of talked about that a little bit. Now that we have an idea of what we want and what we're trying to solve for, we really have to focus on data throughput. What are we going to bring in and how are we going to bring it in? So take it away.
Right. So now just because the typical answer is just log everything. Well, that's not possible.
Why not?
Well, the cost. It costs too much. It costs way too much to log all the data sets that you actually need. So you need, if you don't have an analytic based on those set of data, you really shouldn't be logging it.
Licensing's not.
Who said memory? He said memory. No. Well, no. The other thing is, often not memory, but often here storage is cheap. Storage is very cheap. But when you need to query that data over a large data set, then it gets very expensive because you're talking about IOPS and you're talking about running searches on cores. So typically when you're running a search, you're using up a core. So even if you have a massive infrastructure, each search typically will take up a core. And now you're also looking at your IOPS on your backend for your storage solution. Now if you're storing this data on a purely storage solution, it's not going to work. It's not going to give you the IOPS you need to actually get data from it. If you can't turn that data into information, or what I like to do in the SOAR world is turn data into action. There's no point in collecting data in the first place.
You're still up.
Oh, kind of went over that already. But yeah, you need to understand what's kind of going in firewalls, who manages those firewalls, who to call. When you see a data source that's not coming into your SIEM, you need to know who to call, who to wake up, who to get on the horn to remedy that issue. A lot of times I'll call the NOC guys late at night, even though I'm not working late at night, but I'll get an alert, and then I'll definitely hit them up to figure out, okay, this thing stopped coming in. Who can we call to get this remediated instantly? So that's the joys of being on call.
So integrating with other security tools is a topic as well?
Well, definitely, all your security tools need to flow into your SIEM. You want data from all your main security tools to build part of your use cases. If you have security tools and you're not getting logs or getting information from them, what's the point of having them in the first place? And another thing is, even if you, granted, we all live on the East Coast, and a lot of times I see logs coming on East Coast time. That's not the way you want your logs coming in. You want everything standardized. UTC, Zulu, GM, that's how logs need to come in. That way I don't have to figure out what happened first because of different timestamps. It's a pain. Granted, I like doing regex. I can do regex all day, and I synchronize time traversals with that, but let's just get it in the first time. Don't put all the extra processing on your SIEM.
So let's move on to data storage and retention.
Well, again, typically these are driven by your compliance requirements. This is the easy part. This is the open book test. They might not tell you exactly how to implement it, but they'll tell you what they're looking for, what you need. So when you're going through an audit, you can be able to intelligently explain to them, well, I'm logging this because this is what it says, this is what we're doing, this is how we're collecting it. If you're able to intelligently talk about it, for the most part, 99% of the time, you'll be okay during an audit. There is that one auditor that probably won't care and say, well, you need to do it his way or you're done, but for the most part, understand what you're doing and understand the why. Be able to talk intelligently about what you're collecting and how you're doing it and why you're doing it for. And data protection. Data at the SIEM needs to be protected, and it cannot be modified by any means. So if data gets full in a SIEM solution, there needs to be something where it's automation is going to move that data like a hot, warm data to cold data that's less frequency searched. If a person can manually go in there and audit those logs or edit those logs, that's an issue, and that's a big red flag as far as any kind of audits are concerned. The other thing is scaling. Now, in security, we're typically at cost. We're not typically looked at as a benefit for the company. So the way I typically go about it is scale up. Scale up first. So you look at your systems, you scale up, get bigger servers. So if you're starting with like a medium instance, something in AWS, you scale up, get a larger instance, get something a little bit better, monitor performance. Once you get that instance right size, then you scale out and get multiple instances and build a cluster because you need to have high availability for security tools. That's typically a requirement, and you will get that from most of your compliance compliance requirements.
And fast storage.
Well, if you can't search it, what's the point of using it? If I'm working an incident and I have 10 incidents, and this one search is going to take me 30 minutes to do, it's not going to get done. So,
if you have 10 incidents, I think you have other problems. Just gonna, especially concurrently.
Well, you already talked about that in your other talk, so I'm not going to, don't need to go there. But yes, the data needs to come back quickly for the analyst to actually make a decision. The analyst needs to know, is this malicious or benign traffic? So the data needs to come back quickly.
So let's talk about the analyst a little bit, or let's talk about seeing bad guys. This is what I do for a living. All the stuff he does, way over my head.
He used to be an architect, actually.
Yeah, for like 6 months. And then I quit because I didn't like it at all. Lack of visibility. This is a big one. If it's not there, we can't alert on it. So one of the things that I've done for a lot of the programs that I've built is we hold pretty much weekly meetings for different log requirements where we work with different teams and set requirements on logs. We say, hey, we're working through this use case. We have this thing that we need. We need you to have these logs, or we need to start gathering these logs. Then we rack and stack and prioritize them because it's really a must, because if you don't have it, we can't alert on it. And if you're broad in your detection strategy, you can take multiple log sources, but again, if you don't have them, you can't see it. Lack of context. This is a really, really big one too. If you don't have any context to what that alert is, so if you have an alert that comes in, it exists, it gives you maybe 2 bullet points, or you get like just a source IP and not a destination, or whatever the case may be. You can do very little with it, and it's going to force you to spend a lot of time continue going forward. And if it's not parsed, 1, you're barely going to be able to alert on it. 2, you're barely going to be able to read it, and it's just going to take more time.
Yeah, data enrichment is a big thing with me. data comes in, it needs to have some kind of enrichment process for that data to give context. Not just an IP and a hosting, but what kind of system is this? Is this a critical system? Is this a high-value asset? Is this a system that's on 24/7, or is it a 9-to-5 type system? That context needs to be there available for the analysts. Because at the end of the day, it's mostly about anomaly detection, trying to find the things that stick out.
Yep, and that brings you into a big one that security teams everywhere face, non-actionable alerting. So I've worked at a couple places, and I'm not gonna mention any places, but I will spit out some numbers. I've worked at places where the average time that an analyst had to look at each individual alert was 3.2 minutes. That was their workflow. They had 3.2 minutes to make a determination on whether or not that continued or that was non-malicious. The majority of those things were things that they don't even look at. It leads into alert fatigue, which I'm actually pretty sure is the next bullet point. But half of those things that they looked at and that came in, there was no action that they could take. They could either forward it to the next person, or they could close it. In that case, what's their job? Is their mission to be there to forward something to the next person, or is their mission to be there to try to find bad guys? So I always loop back to understanding your mission and sticking to your mission as being very important in that context. And then we talk about alert fatigue, and alert fatigue is a big one too. Same thing, 3.2 minutes. The problem is everybody talks just about fidelity. And I've been on a kick for years to try to move away from just fidelity and look at 3 categories: fidelity, frequency, and intent. So how bad is this in my environment? How often does it fire? And then what's my ratio of, true positive or investigatable to false positive? It leads you to a couple more false positives, but to a much better and more holistic detection strategy, and tends to analysts get burnt out a little bit less. And it's very hard to make the fidelity alone argument, because oftentimes your breach data is going to be in like the low fidelity thing at the bottom anyway.
Alert fatigue will kill a security program, because if the analysts will let things go that should be investigated or should try to more follow-up, instead of escalating and they just close that notable, then
We're vendor agnostic here. Don't use the word notable.
Oh, event.
No, you're right, and that's the thing. You get so sick of seeing the same thing over and over again, you're going to move on. And I find it really interesting, you talk about security programs, the SOC, the person who typically handles the output of the SIEM is oftentimes the most untrusted part of any security organization, and nobody ever listens to them. And that sucks. But because of that, that's why the fatigue builds, because they don't have any ability to fix it. So providing these individuals who actually have to do this work day in and day out, if you give them and empower them to fix things, it solves the problem. But that's not what this is about. That's a different soapbox. So let's talk about kind of the alerting strategy. And we brought this up a little bit earlier. So I'm a big believer in a hybrid alerting strategy. So taking things from multiple places, feeding those into your SIEM, and using them for an advantage. So you've got a whole host of tools. And we're going to try to stay pretty open, but shout out to Moloch, because it's awesome and my company makes it. Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, whatever it is that you have, you can feed all that data into your SIEM. And you can feed information and context there. And that can give you a lot of information. Then you're going to have all of your intel. And intel can be really valuable when paired with other things. And then you're going to take a framework and potentially build to a framework. Again, I know this one's been beat to death, but it works. So we've used it. So if you're running into that, we can put that to a use case. So we can take this as a use case. And one thing that's worth mentioning is, so say I have CrowdStrike or Carbon Black, and I have a whole bunch of data, and I can send a whole bunch of all the logging data, not just the alerting, over to a SIEM. I can create custom content off that. I can look for intelligence across that. There's a lot of things that you can do when you start to centralize that data in one place that becomes really beneficial, and you no longer become reliant on just a vendor's detection. So I stole this directly from MITRE, who did an APT3 evaluation plan, because it made this really easy. So they evaluated a couple customers. They were testing for these things across the MITRE attack framework. I do realize it's very small. We will make the slides available. Tools, so we have CrowdStrike in this use case. This is what CrowdStrike caught from that section, and this is pure detection that came up to an analyst. This is what was caught. So that can tell us a couple things. We have some intel. That can give us some more stories. So this is general intel on APT3. This gives us hashes, gives us callouts, gives us C2. That's going to cover not necessarily to a specific, but we'll be able to detect some stuff in the following kind of general tactics or techniques. So where are our gaps? What have we missed? What if they switch something? If they switch an IOC, if they switch and stop using PowerShell, what don't we see about that general attack path? Well, we can color some in. We can look for command line interface and suspicious. We can look for scheduled tasks. We can look for new creations of accounts, services. There's a lot of different things that we can go, well, this is what we know. This is what we know we'll detect. Now we can start to build a methodology around covering those gaps and adding new stuff to make sure that we find evil through that use case. Do you want to talk on that one a little bit too?
That's more your world, man.
I'll take it.
I just build this stuff and let you guys do your thing.
So it's not much different when we go into hunting, although a couple things change when you're in hunting and IR. You're much less about alerts and you're much more about data retention. What happens if we detect a breach a year afterward? Does anybody think that's uncommon to detect a breach a year after it happens?
It's about the average.
It's about the average. So do you have a year's worth of the necessary logs that you'll need to investigate that?
Well, who here has a year worth of full PCAP? Anybody?
Is that possible?
I've seen it before.
Was it a 3-person company?
3-letter agency.
Okay, I'll take it. But what do you have and how long do you have it for? That's really important. And you don't have to store everything. Like, you can get a lot from some metadata information. And Bro is pretty lightweight, and you can keep that forever. You can get a lot from that. Searching through big data, you're looking at bigger data sets. You're looking at from a hunting perspective. So you're going, I want to see all PowerShell. Or I want to see all unsigned binaries that are 64 to 75 kilobytes. I realize that's very specific, but I did that on a breach case.
Yeah, or all.
So that brings the importance of making sure that your data is indexed and parsed appropriately. Also, making sure that there's training on how to use the tool and its query language effectively. I'm personally a big fan of index equals star.
No.
I had to. But that's just me. Lack of visibility, that's another one. And we kind of talked about this earlier. More than just an alert, you want all the visibility if you're in an IR or hunt case, because you don't know where they came in, you don't know what they went to, you don't know where they pivoted from, none of that. So the more visibility you have, the better. Now, it does have to be realistic because you can't overload, and some data you just don't need. But it makes sense before you even start doing this stuff to prioritize what log types and sources you need and how long you're going to store them for. There's a lot of setup that goes into a tool like this before you get to do all the cool stuff, and a lot of people skip that part.
Yeah, that's another great thing too. For one of the hunts we did, we looked for new user agent strings, and that was widely successful for one of our teams. So just think outside the box, which probably I don't think is even on MITRE, last I checked.
Might not be. So if we come back to this, same use case, same attacker scenario, same all that. We know what we can detect. We've built some other detections for it. We know what we would see. Let's add a hunt. Last time, this is what we got. Oh, this is what we can hunt, and I've missed some. I guarantee I've missed some. So don't hold me to it. But these are just some real quick things that we can hunt. So maybe we have a very specific PowerShell detection, but we want to look for PowerShell overall, or command line interface, or scheduled tasks, or new services, or process injections. These are all things that we can kind of take and say, okay, my hunt rotation's coming up. What do I want to look for? Let me pick a use case. Let me form a hypothesis based on that use case, and then let me start testing different things and looking for things that would fit into that attacker pattern. That can become really beneficial, and then you can kind of go from that and pivot from that and say, hey, I found something really cool. Move from there to, let's see if we can fine-tune that, turn it into a detection so that we have it long-term and not just for 1 month until next year when we do it again. Just some kind of cool log sources that are really beneficial and that I've found doing IR engagements from a Windows perspective. But if anybody wants to take a picture of that, feel free. But it's all stuff that we've looked at, stuff that we've used not just for detections, but in an IR. We wanted to see this stuff because we'd find a lot of bad there. So that brings us to moving past the basics, which we've got this set up, we've got a strategy, we've got it built, we've got something. What else can you do?
Yeah, I definitely like to automate routine processes that your SOC normally does. I don't like the idea of seeing analysts typically doing things like NS lookup, LDAP lookups, creating tickets, sending emails. I tend to want to automate a lot of those processes, or at least automate those frameworks where the analyst can just kind of, that stuff will pop up. The analyst will see it, and then they can add some notes and then send it off their way, kind of saving their time. Because like I said, we have a shortage of people doing this kind of work, and it's not going to get any better. Granted, it might be a self-inflicted wound, but that's another topic for another day. But that's the case. That's the state that we live in. So I'm a big believer in automation in the security process.
It allows the analyst to be an analyst or a detective or the person who goes and finds things and lets them focus more on what it is that they should be doing rather on, oh, man, this thing happened. I got to open a ticket with that team to fix it. I got to open a ticket with that team to fix it. I got to open a ticket for myself to track it internally. I got to go run these 5 queries. Like, it removes the minutia, which is really, really nice and something that I'm glad to see that's really coming up, so to speak, and that's getting more popular. I'm very excited to see some of the platforms that do this get way more mature over time. Next one, AI and machine learning applied to data. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert on either of those topics. I am going to say that a lot of the time that I spent as a consultant, we had a drinking game whenever this came up in a vendor call.
No, there are some decent use cases of it. We had a customer that were able to use machine learning to detect when drives were going to fail. Not a great use case because, granted, you're not saving a ton of money, but it was something where you could be predictive and kind of order drives before the drive actually failed and swap it out before you had a down drive. So.
And I mean, there's some really good behavioral analytics that kind of come with this, and you can apply a lot of this to that behavioral analytic. So as you start to look into like some of the user behavior analytic tools and stuff that use this, like this person never ever logs in from this location at this time, and we've got a year's worth of data to support that. Like that can be really interesting and really beneficial. So I think some of the AI and ML stuff will move towards that and getting like a little more of that scope, detecting odd exfiltration,
Yeah,
things like that.
Big on the anomaly detection side of the house.
Mm-hmm. And anomaly is probably honestly one of the best ways to find bad guys. Atomic is much harder. Behavioral analytics, we kind of already covered that one. And then the last one is SOAR, which is essentially automation of routine processes. But like I said, we added the word, and I was busy with the other presentation, so I didn't set the transitions right, apparently.
Fair enough. But yeah, but quick thing on behavioral analytics, or kind of, you typically don't even really need like really fancy tools to do this kind of stuff. With a customer, they had HPSS fully implemented, and I was tagged to do some insider threat work. Here, tag you're it. So now I looked at some of the things that they had in place. So I figured out, okay, let's take a look at removable media. So I wrote a short Python script, basically taking people who are authorized to burn media and people who are actually burning media, and then whatever that delta is, send to the HPSS team, let them deal with that. What happened was they actually got emails. They were pretty upset that I was able to find people removing media with HPSS fully installed and implemented. So now, was it a fail within the group policy, or was it HPSS itself? Really not my issue. The thing is that we found it, and now we need to fix it. So trust but verify, like I say in security. So look at problems and give it a second look. Don't assume things are working as should.
Take a moment to give special thanks. I don't think we're going to read them out, but they do exist. This list gets longer every time we do it. But thanks to all the people who kind of proofread this, helped us out with it, were inspirations for it. Thanks to everybody who came to watch. We appreciate it. Do you have any final comments on the topic itself or pieces of advice for SIEM users everywhere?
If you are a SIEM user, I would definitely say look at some SOAR solutions. It's not built to replace your job. It's going to make your stuff easier for you. So don't fear the SOAR.
Contrary to the dashboards that they put up whenever you buy one that says you've saved this much money by automating, you can fire this many people.
You could easily hide those dashboards like I've done.
No, I would agree. Automation, I think, is the way we're going. It really is. But the other one is just have a mission statement and Ask everything. Every question that you ask should be based around that mission statement. Does it meet that mission statement? It will make what you do so much easier so you can avoid being a death by 1,000 cut shop and doing 1,000 things that you shouldn't be doing and not actually being able to focus on what you want. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, gripes?
Anyone?
Yeah, you want to come up and grab the mic, or I guess I can just jump down.
Yeah, okay, let's go.
I'm cool with that. Here you go.
Go.
Well, my question is for JR. So you said that seeing the NS lookups and the LDAP lookups, you didn't want to see that, because it's kind of what I would think of as an anti-pattern. So anything more there, anti-patterns like making purchases on the wrong kind of fast storage, or any, like you've got the basics down, now you're ready to like up level. So any mistakes there, you can limit to 3, I guess.
Okay, so what do you mean by anti-pattern?
So I don't think, and I think I get it. It's not that he didn't want to see that. It's that he didn't want the analyst manually running.
I want analysts manually doing it. That data should already be there presented to the analyst. An analyst should not get an alert with just an IP address for something that's internal. An analyst should not get because for the most part, our usernames are kind of coded, not typically your full-out username. That should not be, the analyst should get your full name, what section, and your email address. Like that should be there for the analyst when the alert fires.
You're very intimidating from down here.
So keep doing that. So it's more about, that was a sign that maybe something could be done better, like there's room for improvement. So what's the next one? You've got the fundamentals right. You're ready to put in fast storage or something else that you get from basics to.
I guess, yeah, well, I'll say what next is let the analysts, they'll have more time to actually work on incidents and research the events, look at trends and patterns, work with your threat intel team, and not just take everything at face value. Let the analysts make decisions. Critical thinking is important in this industry. If you're training them to just check boxes and they see, oh, well, this is benign, but not actually, they see something from virus total and say, oh, it's not malicious. They assume it's not malicious. Well, what's happening on our host? What's happening on our infrastructure? What process is making that call? You want analysts to think that way and look more into that incident that's assigned to them.
So kind of giving them more time to do a bit more like due diligence.
Exactly.
A bunch of like simple facts.
You said it way better than I did. But
Yeah, that's accurate. So one of the things that I do programmatically, and it's time pending, so we're always trying to get more time, is I dedicate 25% of analyst resources to hunting exercises and a monthly rotation that includes things like working on tuning content, which helps build them, research projects that they can go look for new ways to find badness. And there's an outcome of each one of those products or projects, but I try to keep 25% of time. So everything I can shave off gives my analysts more time to do things that help build us rather than just doing the stuff that's happening day in and day out. Question?
Any other question?
Well, I was more of a statement, but I was going to say, if you add that context, it might include a field that's in another index, and then you can key on to bring in additional data. So if you don't have the context, you can't link several data sources together because you don't have the data.
So if you add context, it might give you information from other data sets that you can pull in to
Exactly.
add additional context, and that's absolutely correct.
Yes, you're 100%.
What do you got?
So you're talking about knowing your use case, and you had a bunch of different options up there. My question is, if you're like a small shop and you've got multiple needs there, how much trouble is it going to be, are you going to find yourself in if you're trying to use this for multiple use cases? Are you going to start stepping yourself in the foot? Is it just be too much data to try and deal with, or?
In most cases, I don't think so. So small shop, you're realistically going to have less data. So it does become what you can afford in a lot of ways. So can I afford this? Can I afford that? So you have to prioritize a little bit based on what your cost model is and what you're willing to pay. But take that equation out of it. I've been in shops, and I'm in a shop now where we have multiple different teams and use cases that run out of the same tool. We tag things a little bit differently. We collect things a little bit differently. We have a few tension points every now and again of going like, I want this stuff to go away. Well, I need that. And that'll happen a little bit, and then you kind of like weigh your risk of going away versus needing it and work together and get there. But in most cases, you're probably going to have more than one use case. But each team should only approach the tool from the use case that they need and then work with other people and say, well, this is what I need. What do you need? And then kind of build that plan together. There you go.
So if you look into the role of junior analysts, I fully agree that using SOAR will further make your SOC more efficient. But I also believe that junior analysts can really learn on the job by doing that more simple work. So how do you look into the future of training and onboarding junior analysts and becoming more senior to automate or decide what to automate in SOAR?
So I genuinely tend to hire junior analysts because I like to build people from the ground. But teaching them how to do an NS lookup isn't really teaching them a high thing of value. Teaching them how to think like a detective and approach this problem and go look for the other things. So I have a saying in any shop I've ever been in, and that's that I don't run a paint-by-numbers SOC. There's no step-by-step. You'll have guidelines, but like you use your brain. So when I bring somebody in, we'll kind of walk them through the process. This is what you can usually look for. And then we move past that and we go, okay, like you saw this thing. You can go look here, you can go look here, you can go look here. And we figure it out. So I don't think anybody's talking about gating each step of the investigation process. In that case, you don't really need a person. Right. But we are talking about giving them more time to focus on those investigative steps and the deeper investigations and that learning opportunity, which is where I think they'll get real value, the critical thinking side of it, as opposed to I have to run NS lookup every time or check virus total 500 times a day.
I think to your point that eventually the analyst should be able to contribute their own playbooks or integrate new sources into your SOAR.
100%.
Yes.
That to me is a educating process, right? So then the analysts feel like they're a part of the team and they're contributing to the customer success.
So
yeah, I build my playbooks with my junior analysts during the day-to-day, because the senior analysts are typically putting out fires, dealing with leadership, going to a lot of meetings. When I build stuff in the SOAR, I typically run through the junior analysts first, and then I kind of let the senior analysts take a look over, and then we kind of meet it, then we build it and then implement it into our product.
So it's an interesting thought process. How many people here like work in a SOC or as an analyst in some way, shape, or form? That's a decent number. Outside of that, how many people feel like they have direct value on the work that they do and what work they do? I would hope everyone, but that's often not the case. And I only saw about half hands, so there's a lot of people who are shy or people don't feel that way. If you don't feel like you have direct impact on what you do, are you happy there and do you want to stay there? I got some meh. So that's the thing, though. Like, if you don't give the analysts some ownership over what they do, and trust me, as a guy who runs SOCs, most SOCs analysts don't get a say in what they do, and at least a lot of the ones that I've been around, and it's awful. Like, and burnout is high, and they quit really quick, and they get jaded from the whole industry.
Yeah,
and
turnover in the SOC is
it's
rough.
ridiculous. It's awful. But a lot of it is because they have no say, which means they don't grow, they don't move forward, they don't. Anyway, completely different soapbox, but yes.
Different topic.
You had AI and machine learning up there. If you're not retaining data for long periods of time, is it even worth tackling that as a use case? You know, if you only have 30 days worth of logs, you know, the more data you have, the more, I guess, the more likely that the use cases you're building are actually going to match upon what you're looking for. So is it even worth tackling that if you're only retaining small amounts of data?
Yes.
Well, you can still summarize that data for the AI ML scenarios. You're typically not going to store everything. Like I said, scope is very important in this world, in the type of work that we do.
So you run it every day, you run run it every 30 days, run the analytic on it, store the analytic because that's much smaller, and then 30 days later store that analytic, and then you can compare analytics. So there is value there. It's more complicated, but there's value there.
Hi, so I'm auditing a SIEM right now for my organization, and we've never had one before, so everyone's just like, yeah, SIEM, I've heard of that, go for it. That'll be adorable. You know, kind of like when you're baking cake with your kid, and you're just like, here, you just do this part right there. So I've got data coming in, and what I'm noticing is that certain things at the NOC level are being categorized wrong, so like, regular ADFS logins are being considered threats. So it's messing up my stream data. It's like, why do we have 10,000 threats in an hour? Oh, everyone just logged in. So once I kind of weed through that to figure out what's actually a threat and what's not actually a threat, how long do you think I should start looking at data to build my baseline before I start like putting in anomaly
Well,
detection?
for one thing, you're always going to, tuning never ends, right? So you made, tuning never ends. If someone tells you that, they're lying, they're wrong. No, I'm not trying to drop the mic. No, but no, like I said, you have something that needs to get tuned out of your SIEM. That shouldn't be an alert unless there's something really wrong in that organization. So you tune. But since you're an auditor, you've done your job and you found it. So good on you.
I just have to say as we go through this, this crowd at BSides DC is one of the best crowds I've ever had at a conference ever.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yes, I will agree. Good questions.
What else?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
So I like what you said about tuning never ends, but where does the tuning begin? You get a SIEM and you have alerts and things coming in from servers, and you ask the various types of server operators what is important, and they don't know. So where do we begin to start tuning the SIEM to make it actually useful for whatever's coming in?
Well, you need to track your false. Well, something that we did, we tracked all our false positives, right? Once things are vetted and analyzed, and you see, okay, so we have typical analytic, and let's say we see this analytic, 80% of these are false positives. So maybe we just start looking at the analytic and tune out some of that noise out, because you don't want to give the analyst busy work. Alert, like Shawn alluded to earlier, alert fatigue will ruin your SOC.
So you can definitely count, and you can do it by loudest, but I'm going to present one other possibility here and one other approach. What's your industry, and then what's the threat landscape of that industry? So if you look at industry verticals and you understand who might attack you and how they might attack you, or what data is important to you, so your crown jewels, start there. Start with what matters to you most.
Because I've failed implementing a SIEM many times, and I think what I've learned from that was utilizing the Pareto Principle. So even if the industry that you're in and the company doesn't really know what's going on, you can start with your Active Directory domain admin, right? And then work from there and scale out, as opposed to spending millions and millions of dollars paying Ernst & Young and well, not really, I won't say their names, but I just said it, but paying a lot of people a lot of money to do what some of the things that are low-hanging fruit. But I had a question. Are there a comprehensive to map to the frameworks that are utilized in for MITRE for like data sources and things like that? And then what are some trusted, reliable ways to send them without using agents? Is there another alternative to that?
So I can cover a little bit of the first part, and this is the kind of fun for me because we talk about MITRE and it's great, and I use it and we're mapping to it. But I can also tell you that, how do I want to say it? Oftentimes you need way more than one detection per technique. I'll put it that way. So a lot of people they'll like heat map out MITRE, they'll be like, oh, I got 150 detections, I got MITRE covered, I'm good to go. I've got like 15 different ones just for valid accounts that look for different kind of stuff. I've always been a little bit of the camp that like detection building is a very custom thing for your environment and should be taken as your environment. So I use very little out of the box from that perspective, or like shared. I'll read about something, maybe I'll see something posted somewhere and I'll take that and I'll try to adjust it specifically for my environment before anything goes live. Otherwise, you end up getting into that point where things are flying off the chain because somebody turned on 150 out-of-the-box rules and didn't do anything else with it.
Don't ever do that.
For your second question,
I guess the second part, though, about trying to get this data without agents. I mean, obviously, we could use like syslog for network, because there's devices on our network that we can't put agents on anyway. So we're utilizing syslog. We're putting it on a syslog server, preferably a syslog cluster, so nothing goes down. So and then, but there are some tools. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but I know some. Go ahead.
Windows Event Forwarding, WEF.
Yeah, WEF. There are tools that can forward without an agent, and then you can ingest it the same way into your SIEM. So yeah.
Over there.
Yeah, so kind of talking about, I have a twofold question, may not be related, but tuning signatures, with regard to the fact that you've got, indicators that are obviously accumulating. So the question is are there any best practices for tuning? I've got organizations that are just accumulating and, storing and never deleting, obviously. And then the second question is at what point do you pivot to kind of a hunt model rather than just sort of alerting on everything?
Okay, so the first question is about tuning, and I think I can probably answer this well. So best practice for tuning is general involvement of the teams who are handling it throughout most of it. So like as stuff comes in and gets investigated, if there's multiple teams working, if there's one team working, it's live and in real time. So you're doing live and in real time investigation and then clicking a button and sending it up for tuning, or if you're automating, clicking a button and tuning it without having to send it to somebody else to do it or do it yourself. The second part, and this was quite literally, I think, my topic in the last talk, the shiny light syndrome. So like hunting has extreme value in a lot of ways. Like hunting is a very valuable service because you're going and looking at thousands upon thousands of low fidelity indicators for a specific thing. If you're doing it hypothesis based, which is a lot of people are saying, I think there might be web shells. How can I go find web shells? Let me just look for web shells. The problem is you can't have just that. Because if you do, hey, maybe January I look at web shells and I'm not going to get back to January until next year in March. What happened in between? Oh, did we build any detections for those web shells? No. Oh, well, hey, we were back to hunting and we found a whole bunch of web shells from 7 months ago. Oh, and a whole bunch of data was exfiltrated too. Oh, great. So hunting is an add-on that you should use to strengthen your other programs, look for gaps and help refine in a lot of ways, at least in my mind.
With regards to the tuning question, I do agree with you wholly about the use case, and I can't evangelize it enough. You tune before you have to tune when you develop proper use cases. Like if you develop the proper use case to ingest your Intel feed, but didn't talk about while you're developing the use case that you have to weed out those Intel indicators after a certain amount of days, then you're setting yourself up to have to tune them afterwards. So if you develop the right use cases, you're tuning before you even have to tune.
And sometimes you don't necessarily see the data, so you don't know how you need to tune it. But like when we institute a new rule, our policy doesn't send it right to an alert for my team. It goes somewhere else for general review, normalization, and tuning before it ever goes live.
Yeah, especially with using anything in a SOAR platform, I need to see that data before I automate that data. I mean, I'm not going to make a guess and then automate. That's going to lead to failure every time.
By the way, I just checked. Are we at time, or do we have time for more questions? We're at time. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Coming out. Cool. Oh, man. Huh?
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's tough. Dude, not even cloud. Look, I'm at Census.
Thank you.
I can get an email that says, hey, we're standing up 8,000 servers.
Okay.
It didn't go through the cab.
Right.
8,000 servers are popping up. Oh, it's still.
I see you now.
Azure have a good handle on that. We have a good handle on Azure over there.
That looks.
I haven't checked it out yet, but I would say this. Microsoft already has the AV is secure. At this point, there's no point in buying unless you're doing a full DVR type thing like that. I agree. Sorry, it's freaking awesome. I haven't seen it, but I would imagine it's pretty good. Let's see.
Does he need any of these?
Sorry?
Is he okay?
Oh yeah, he's good.
He's got-
He needs a mic.
He needs a mic. What kind does you? Which kind?
Probably the lavalier mic.
I'll actually give you one with fresh batteries.
I just stopped the camera.
You do? Yeah, I didn't know how to stop them. Thank you.
Oh yeah, it's just this button right here. That'll start and stop the cameras for you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes,
Do you have a microphone?
he does, but this one has new batteries, so I think we should give him this one.
It needs batteries, or you put new ones in it?
They put new ones.
Oh, okay.
Hello. Hi, how are you doing?
Doing good, doing good.
My name is Victoria.
Hey, how are you? I'm Keith.
Nice to meet you, Kate.
Awesome, awesome. Were you at our Blacks and Cyber event last night? Because I didn't see you.
Oh no, I actually didn't make it. I had to leave.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah.
okay. We'll do this. Connect with me on LinkedIn. You on
Yeah,
LinkedIn?
yeah. I'd love to.
Check, check. Yeah, so I shouldn't go to the bathroom then?
Exactly.
Microsoft Server 2012. It doesn't. Thank you. Thank you. It doesn't play nice sometimes, and if we're
right, because if you want to put it to like a syslog server, you gotta have it.
the hard way, I was like, oh, we'll just use web. Let's just go, and it was just like, no, no.
Same thing.
It says Splunk. They were like, yeah, just put an equal on there.
But no, I don't work. I do not work for Swarm.
Hey there, friends. We're going to